If you like the video, then please consider supporting Slope's Game Room on Patreon.
I wanna take you for a ride.
We all have the ability to start a crowdfunding campaign, the ability to make a video and sell our brilliant idea to the world. And although sometimes that works out pretty great, other times not so much. And today, I'm going to be finally doing the video that all you guys have been asking me to do for so bloody long. A list of successful campaigns that hit their goals. Yeah, that's a little bit boring for me, guys, so instead I'm going to flip the whole idea on its head by creating a list of successful campaigns, sure, but successful campaigns that ended up quite horrifically. If you think Mega Man 9, you are way off. This video is going to make that unpolished turd look like one of the best games in 67,226 backers collection. Oh no. Guys, get yourself a box of tissues as I, DJ Slope, present to you 5 horrible Kickstarter success stories. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. Oh, and by the way, for any action movie fans out there, be sure to go and check out Oliver Harper's awesome new campaign, In Search of the Last Action Heroes, one of my absolute favourite channels on YouTube and most definitely one to watch. Anyway, the link's in the description and all that jazz, so for now, back on with the show. Let's start off on a low point. It's actually a bit of a theme for this episode, I'm afraid. This poor unfortunate soul is Ed Carter, who, just like myself, is very much into board games. His small company had released several games by the time this campaign went live, and by using what he'd learnt from those mini slices of enjoyment, he decided to go to Kickstarter to take it up a notch.
I didn't know anything about that game until Essen 2010 last year. A friend of mine bought Close Rome and he was like, you got to have this game. This game is incredibly amazing. I didn't really like how it looked, so I didn't want to buy it.
Okay, not exactly the most charismatic campaign to ever grace Kickstarter's portal of mess, but even with a video like this, he managed to smash his goal of only $21,000 when 1,612 backers got it up to $73,102. Glory to Rome was a game that, when eventually released, actually ended up winning several awards, and everyone that played it really did seem to like it. So, what's the problem? Well, actually, the campaign was too successful. I know, that doesn't exactly make sense, so allow me to break it down. Board games for this guy were very much a hobby. However, when 1,612 backers jump on board, that hobby basically becomes a job. And because of this, he treated it like one. Free shipping was given to all backers that agreed to pick it up from local board game shops, Ed's way of building up relationships with suppliers, and he had a direct line with Chinese manufacturers, completely cutting out any middlemen. This was made possible as his partner Amber Ying could speak Chinese, which made the whole ordeal quite fluent. Or so he thought. Amber didn't agree with the whole free shipping, and after plenty of debates, she quit the project, leaving Ed with no decent way in speaking with those manufacturers. Everything from this point on just went downhill. Because he never added a no step sign to the shipping containers, the postal company didn't see any issue in putting large crates on top of his one, completely destroying the games. Postage to places like Australia ended up being far more expensive than originally thought. His 9-to-5 job at Staples let him go, resulting in Ed's very own savings going into fulfilling this campaign, which amounted to about $100,000 to $120,000, and he stopped paying the mortgage, which lost him his house. When explaining this situation to backers who, after a year of the campaign being a success, still hadn't got their games, one rather unhappy fellow replied, "I'm sorry, but f*** off with your guilt trip. My only crime is donating money to help get this project off the ground. I see no reason why you should be blaming us for your downfall. So, come on guys, who's to blame here? I am interested in hearing what your opinions are below. From what I can tell, pretty much everyone got a copy of the game. There are a few stragglers that never got responded to, but it was so long ago, we can't really be certain for sure. And what has happened to Ed Carter? Well, even though he says that he's up for doing more board games, if he actually did, he didn't do them through Kickstarter, that's for sure. And his board game website called Cambridge Games Factory has long gone. And now, instead forwards you onto a pretty dodgy looking website where Ed gives new business advice. Yeah, you know what Ed? I think I'm good, mate.
Hello there, I'm Adam Sessler, and I'm here to tell you about a game that I think is one of the most brilliant ideas I've ever heard. I was approached recently by the gentleman at Gun Media and told about a Friday the 13th game that is an asymmetric multiplayer game where one person plays Jason and everyone else plays counselors trying to make it through the night.
Gun Media, the guys responsible for the very popular Friday the 13th video game Kickstarter. They needed a crazy high 700,000 and they managed to get it when 12,213 backers brought Jason back to life with a combined total of $823,704. Not bad, right? Well, it gets better considering the game actually reviewed pretty well too when it was finally released. So, I ask again, what was the problem? Well, it all involves a little unknown company called Mighty Rabbit Studios. You see, Gun was very thankful to their backers, as they should be, and to show their gratitude they decided to give the Savini codes, which are basically a very good looking skin for Jason, to the people that backed the project when it was live. A very noble thing to do, but obviously when something like this happens to a game and popular property that was doing the rounds quite nicely, this happens. Just to clarify, this is a skin, nothing more. But anyway, hardcore fans will be hardcore fans, right? This is where that company Mighty Rabbit Studios come into play. The company was apparently associated with Limited Run Games, the people responsible for distributing the game and codes. Whoever this was actually had a pretty crazy amount of those codes and was selling them for a nice pop on eBay. Yep, Limited Run Games, the company who just love to sell, well, limited run games, have cut out the middleman too and gone directly to eBay themselves. This caught the attention of Reddit user Jason Throwaway13, who posted a fairly long and detailed post about this mysterious seller. The news spread like wildfire and the seller quickly stopped selling Friday the 13th Savini codes 15 minutes after the post went live. So, what's going on here? Well, everything sold by this company was stolen, and Limited Run Games had absolutely no idea who did it.
Up until last December, we often utilised many temporary contract workers to assist with the various busy work that shipping thousands of packages on an irregular schedule requires. It's our best guess that one of these workers took it upon themselves to illicitly access the codes. This was not sanctioned by us nor Gun, and neither of us knew it had happened until the community brought it to light. We stopped utilising temporary workers in December, when we noticed that our game inventory was off. Without those previous workers around, the inventory loss stopped. We don't have any reason to believe that the person in question still works for us. Unfortunately, we don't know who the specific culprit is. We foster a very open and friendly environment at our office, and we never expected something like this to occur. These actions completely betray the trust we had in whoever this person is.
And that's it. The remaining used codes got wiped, Limited Run Games bucked up their security ideas, and the only way to access the code nowadays is by cracking it, which you can also do on eBay. Ugh. hang on a minute, haven't we just done this one? Well, surprisingly, that's not the only horror story related to this game. So, let's call this Friday the 13th Part 2. Don't worry, I'll make this one quick. So apparently, even though the game asked for a whopping 700,000, which, like I said, it achieved, it wasn't all thumbs up and praise for Gun Media, or to be more specific, Randy Greenback, the executive director of the game. It became apparent almost instantly that the campaign was doing bloody well, and they needed someone to keep up with all of the efforts needed to run this Kickstarter during its short life. Randy wasn't currently coding and he wasn't animating either in those early stages, so he took it upon himself to become the community manager. However, nobody, especially Randy, honestly anticipated how much time a single Kickstarter that was doing very well, obviously, needed to be a success. To cut a rather long story short, Randy almost died. No, not by Jason, but instead by pneumonia. It was like 3 full-time jobs. It was 18 hours a day, a lot of the time answering every email, and at the end of it all, I think I got pneumonia. Thankfully, the guy didn't die, and as previously stated, the Kickstarter ended up being quite the success, which just goes to show, if anybody out there is planning on running a successful Kickstarter campaign, then you should probably brace yourself, otherwise, pneumonia is gonna get you. Okay guys, I know this is a bold statement to make, but out of the 18 Kickscammer videos I've made and the 50 plus campaigns found within them, this is easily the most horrific and in all honesty is gonna be pretty damn hard to beat. Ken, have a seat my man, even you will be shocked about this one. I warn you before going ahead that this one sadly gets a little bit graphic. Viewer discretion is most definitely advised. It is my great displeasure to show off this self-taught Danish engineer, Peter Madsen. Oh boy. Right, let's start off clean. Peter is a very intelligent man, and in his own words, a maker of extreme machines, who basically used his naval engineering knowledge to, well, build a bloody submarine, or to be more specific, a midget submarine, which is essentially a mini submarine that weighs less than 150 tons. Yeah, you can see where this one's going, right? Well, you would be wrong, as he actually bloody did it. In fact, it went so well that he decided to build a space rocket, which also, well, it did okay in the test runs. So a few hiccups aside, everything seemed to be going sort of in the right direction, as Copenhagen Suborbitals, the company partly founded by Peter, launched a couple of campaigns to get this thing going. One succeeded and one failed. However, the one that failed had that funky flexible golfing going on, so the company was still able to get away with the funds. The company is run by engineers in their own time, most of which don't get paid. To this day, they seem to be doing pretty good work, and the launch of this rocket has been pushed back to the summer of 2018. In other words, this little organisation is fine. However, the real focus of all of this has to do with Peter. Peter was obsessed with engineering. Not only was he responsible for the launch pad, the launch system, and the booster rocket engines within Copenhagen Suborbital's early days, but in his spare time, he went back and worked on those submarines. Oh yes, submarines. He made 3 of them. You got the UC-1 Freya, the first ever private Danish submarine. It was successful and had over 500 dives before it was demolished, and in 2008, it sank. But don't laugh, that was always expected. Next up, you got the UC2 Cracker, which was the first diesel-electric amateur sub in Denmark. Another successful sub that actually didn't sink and now can be found on display at Denmark's Technical Museum in Helsinge. And finally, you got the UC3 Nautilus, which at the time was the biggest privately built sub in the world. It's done over 1,000 dives and was nothing but a success for Peter and his team. But just like all subs, a few years later it needed a cleanup, which is when the third Indiegogo campaign was launched. For only 50,000 they wanted to sandblast, paint and even give a few upgrades to UC3 Nautilus. Sadly, it didn't hit its goal. But yet again, the old flexible goal rears its head and the organisation got away with just over $6,000. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where the whole thing went seriously tits up. The ownership of the sub became quite a heated debate between Peter and Copenhagen Suborbitals, which is why Peter left the organisation taking his sub with him. The whole debacle ended up catching the interest of Swedish journalist Kim Wall, who was invited by Peter to take a trip on the sub with him at around 7 PM on August the 10th. 8 hours passed. During the time, Kim's partner Ole Stobb began to worry as there was no sign of his lady friend or the Nautilus, so he ended up biking around the pier to try and find the submarine. Unable to find anything, he decided to contact the authorities. It was 3:30 AM when police received the call, who sent out helicopters and ships searching for the submarine, and it wasn't until 10:30 AM when the first sight of the sub was spotted, and surprisingly, everything seemed fine, and Pete was seen popping out of the submarine's tower alone. He then went back down underneath the hatch before quickly re-emerging as the submarine began to sink. Peter then quickly jumped out of the vessel and swam to a nearby boat where he was rescued and he returned to land. With all of Peter's hard work on space rocket submarines, he had actually become a little bit of a celebrity in Denmark, and during the search, journalists had heard of the missing sub and was also waiting for him at the dock.
Peter! Peter! Are you okay? You okay?
You see, according to Peter, the issue was to do with the ballast tank, which apparently holds air and water to vary the sub's buoyancy, whatever that means. Regardless, Peter explained that this ballast tank filled with water, which resulted in the sub suddenly submerging, and as the hatches were open, the 3-year-long project was gone in about 30 seconds. If he'd been below deck, he would have been killed. Sadly, the sinking of a homemade submarine isn't the end of this tale, as Peter seemed to forget to mention anything about the reporter on board. When questioned, he said that she was never on board and he dropped her off just before the sub took off. Was he lying? Well, here's a picture of the two of them together on the submarine. Obviously something was fishy. Nobody could find Kim Wall, so to get to the bottom of this, the sub was rescued from its sunken state as officials expected to find the remains of the journalists. And surprisingly, they didn't find anything. Still, the Fuzz didn't believe his story and they ended up arresting him for involuntary manslaughter, for having killed in an unknown way and in an unknown place Kim Isabel Fredrika Wall of Sweden sometime after Thursday at 5 PM. The very next day, Peter found himself in court where he changed his story. He did not drop her off, but instead she died in the submarine after a hatch fell on her head, which resulted in him panicking, so he dragged her body out of the sub by a rope and buried her at sea. Not long after, a cyclist riding along the island found a woman's torso had swept ashore. Eventually, divers found her legs, her arms, her head, clothing, a saw wrapped in bags, and knives that had been used to stab Kim in a certain area 15 times. Obviously, his charge was changed from involuntary manslaughter to simply manslaughter, and when detectives checked his computer, they found hardcore snuff porn that involved women being strangled, decapitated, and tortured. Regardless of all of this, Peter kept to his story. Mostly. There were the occasional added extra like carbon monoxide poisoning and the admittance of dismemberment. So, where are we now? Well, in court on April the 25th, Judge Annette Burko and her 2 jurors found Peter Madsen guilty of all 3 charges: premeditated murder, aggravated sexual assault, and the desecrating of a corpse. This is a cynical and pre-planned sexual assault of a particularly brutal nature on a random woman who, in connection with her journalistic work, accepted an invitation for a sailing trip on the accused submarine. Peter has now been given life in prison. I don't really need to add anything to this. I feel the same way as you. It's a horrific story that opened up beyond my wildest nightmare. I expected to tell you guys a funny story of a sunken submarine, but instead, this crazy tale unfolded itself. Okay, time for something far less morbid. This is the story of Dimension Drive's unfortunate Kickstarter. Dimension Drive has a pretty nifty idea, a vertical shmup style game with a very unique twist. Two Awesome Studio had made a game that involved you controlling the same ship twice. Not only have you got to shoot everything that moves, but you also got to dodge enemies by quickly flipping your ship to the opposite screen. A pretty ingenious idea this one, and one that is fully worth checking out. Yet again, it scored quite highly for a budget game by all who played it, and hey, if you want to support the show, you can even use the affiliate link below to go and buy the Play exclusive PS4 or Switch versions of the game. I know, I'm absolutely shameless. Anyway, before the game was a success, it actually almost failed its Kickstarter campaign. It needed €30,000, and on the final day it was pretty obvious that they wasn't gonna make it. So in a sort of last-ditched effort, carefree, we're not gonna make it anyway Twitch stream, they decided to play the game live for anybody that cared and watched the timer count down. And then it happened.
What? 29467. I don't know who is this. There's 5k there.
No, someone put 5k. I know, nice. This is live, yeah, guys.
Obviously it's fully muffled and hard to actually hear what is being said, but I think we can all agree that this guy especially was bloody happy. In the last few hours of the campaign, one very generous backer knocked down €7,000, which was pretty much exactly what they was short of. As you can imagine, we partied and shouted in social media congrats were in order. And all of that disappeared 30 minutes more or less before the end of the campaign. The Kickstarter guys sent us an email informing us that the pledges were fraudulent and they had to remove it, meaning that we were not funded anymore. Apparently, the user that pledged was a troll that wanted to play a really bad joke on us and some other Kickstarter projects. As previously stated, running a Kickstarter is seriously exhausting, and after a month of doing whatever they could to run such a campaign, having all of their emotions hit boiling point before quickly removing them must have been seriously heartbreaking. However, thankfully, the team got their own back. The story obviously hit several news sites around the internet and basically ended up gaining the project plenty of visibility that it previously didn't have. So they relaunched it, and they did it. And like I said, everything turned out great because, sad to say, if it wasn't for this troll, a game that would have never got funded actually did. And yeah, it's a pretty damn good game. Probably the greatest game I've ever played. Forget Game of the Year, more like Game of the Century. In fact, I might go and buy it again. I like it so much. I suppose this way I can put it on my Dimension Drive shelf and build up my Dimension Drive shrine. Oh, I love this game so much. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the video. I want to give a big special shout out to all of my Patreons, but first, an extra big special shout out goes to Ryan Burford, Gary Pinkett, Andrew Dalton, Brent Craft, Ben Jackson, Joe Lazarez, Ian A. Chapman, Phil Olins, Aaron McNamara, Video Game Basement, Hananas, Retro to Next Gen, Garzagor, Cielski, Samuel Victor, Red the Beard, John Fuller, Michael, Conrad Constantine, Pretendo64, Mike Fallon, Gavin Gorvez, Creamy Elephant, James Loveridge, Casey Garner, Blitz, Hedgie Ben Hall, Gemma at Mr. T-Shirts, Jacob Coy, Marcus King Emo Cut, Tyndall June, Rob Jenkins, The Geeky Dad, Rob Carter, aka Fantastic Dizzy, Dunder Control, Todd Poolfolk G, Petty Mew, and Brian Rawson. If you want to get your name shouted out, get your name shown, come see what I'm working on, all of that usual stuff, then please click the link that you see on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever you prefer. But for now, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.